Good morning and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. On behalf of Center for Private Sector Engagement, CPSE, STPI, I, Zainab Mumtaz Baloch, welcome you to today's webinar titled Integration of Pakistan in Global Value Chains. Before we start off with today's session, there are a few housekeeping rules that must be announced. May I please request our speakers to keep their microphones off when they are not speaking to ensure good audio quality for everyone. Speakers are also encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they're speaking, if their network allows to do that without any disruptions. The webinar will be recorded and shared later for your kind reference. You are welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to please share it with your kind network. We are also inviting questions from our audience and colleagues as the session goes. And please feel free to write all your questions in the chat box or on the Q&A box on the right side. Please have the chat box open in the window, or you may also indicate that you want to speak by choosing the raise hand option on the right side of the chat window. The session is going to be bilingual and you may speak in both Urdu or English language as per your convenience. Today's session is going to be moderated by Ms. Maheen Rehan, Research Project Assistant at STPI. Now I hand over the session to her so we may begin with the proceedings. Thank you, Mahanur.
Thank you, Ms. for providing us with housekeeping rules. Thank you, distinguished panelists and your audience for taking out time from your busy schedule for this session. I hope you all are well. It's an opportune time to discuss this topic as the budget has to be announced in a couple of days. So the topic of this webinar is integration of Pakistan in global value chains. My name is Maheen Rehan. I'll be moderating this session. So before we move ahead towards the agenda setting presentation, let me briefly introduce our panelists. So firstly, we have joined by Mr. Jameel Qureshi, who is the Additional Secretary, Executive Director General, Board of Investment. And then we have joined by Dr. Gonzalo Varela. He is the Senior Economist at World Bank. Dr. Gonzalo has a specialization in trade and open economy and macroeconomics, currently leading the trade engagement of World Bank in Pakistan and acting as a focal point for trade and trade policy for Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And then we have joined by Mr. Mohammed Shoaib Zafar. Mohammed Shoaib Zafar, who is the Advisor Trade Policy International Trade Center. Mr. Shoaib has a diverse working experience of both public and private sector that has international organization. He has worked as a Deputy Secretary or to Secretary of Commerce and worked as a Commercial Secretary to the Consulate General of Pakistan. And then we have joined by Dr. Sebastian Pauls, who is the first Consular and Head of Development Corporation, Embassy of Germany. Mr. Paul holds an expertise in advisory services and he has worked as a strategic and advisor at the Asian Development Bank, and he has a good hold at the coordination and trade bridging facility. And last but not the least, we have joined by Mr. Asif Javed, who is Senior Research Associate at STPI. Mr. Asif is currently doing his PhD and his main area of research includes South Asia regional investment and value chain, role of public sector in developing social enterprises, Pakistan economic cooperation with Afghanistan in environmental relations, and then it goes on. So now, once again, on the behalf of STPI, thank you for joining us. Before we proceed towards the question and answer session and discussion, I would like to request Mr. Asif Javed for agenda setting presentation. Over to you, Mr. Asif.
Thank you, Maya. Let me share my screen first. Can you share my? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Visible.
Right. Let me start by the scope of global value chains. What scope does global value chains have for countries that integrated into global value chains? Global value chains provided resource of the provided resources so that countries can import raw material and export the final product. So if a country does not have a competitive advantage in any product, it can import raw material and produce and export the final product. Through this, countries can achieve sustainable growth and exports. Then global value chains are beneficial for both developed and emerging economies. As developed economies can assess the competitive price inputs and high variety of goods and services, while emerging economies can aim for the fast track towards global industrialization, and they can integrate into supply chain, or they can build a new global value chains with the regional partners. Then the other benefits for firms include knowledge through which they can learn, and firm can engage in innovative production process, and industrial achievement can be achieved for firms that integrated in global value chains. OECD reported that around 70% of international trade currently involves global value chains. If we look at the successful examples of integration in global value chains, specifically in our region, 2, 3 prime examples can be set forth. For example, Bangladesh has consistently done well in recent past by integrating in textile value chains, which helped them to increase their exports considerably. Likewise, Vietnam integrated into manufacturing, mobile manufacturing segments. And quite recently, India has liberalized its investment rules for international partners to integrate into global value chains, through which they are reducing the barriers for land and labor to investment. One initiative that is done by central government is to provide the land pool for investment, which has decreased the cost for investors to invest in India. So what is the status of Pakistan currently in global value chains? Pakistan remains unable to achieve sufficient level of foreign value addition to its exports, due to which exports of Pakistan remain stagnant or could not be increased up to a certain level. The contribution of Pakistan in global value chains is only 0.5%, which obviously is not enough, considering the potential that Pakistan has. For instance, Pakistan has advantage in through its strategic location and diverse sectors like textile, agriculture, manufacturing, and services sectors. A study recently conducted pointed out that the firms that integrated into global value chain in Pakistan can benefit to 10% increase, can expect 10% increase. By 10% increase in the global value chains can increase on productivity to up to 1.7% in Pakistan. Okay. Now, if we look at regional partners and their integration into global value chains, Sri Lanka stands apart from the regional partners, as 30%, around 31% of Sri Lanka's total trade is related to global value chains, whereas Bangladesh has done well in recent past. Its total export gross value chain percentage in global trade accounts for around 25%. If we look at the sectoral distribution of global value chains integration of Pakistan, the performance of 3 main sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and services is not satisfactory, whereas out of these three sectors, as these three sectors are main sectors, but their integration is not satisfactory, considering the potential that these sectors contain. If we look at the sectoral linkages with our regional partners, two main sectors that are manufacturing and services sectors are integrated. Pakistan integrated in these two sectors with our regional partners. And the subsectors include textile sectors and cement sectors. These two subsectors are the main sectors in which Pakistan is integrated with the regional partners. One interesting finding is the regional value chain in seafood with Sri Lanka. Considering the blue economy potential that Pakistan has, I think Pakistan can develop regional value chains not only with Sri Lanka but also with Bangladesh and China, where blue economy sector has emerged quite reasonably. Let's not forget the services sectors and its integration. The exports of computer software and software consultancy services for Pakistan increased considerably during last few years. And the key export destinations include USA, Ireland, Singapore, UK, and UAE. This indicates that Pakistan is not only integrated in services sector with the developing economies, but also with developed economies. However, as compared to mature markets such as India and Philippines, Pakistan's share in global offshore services only accounts for 0.1%, which obviously is quite low. SDPI conducted a survey on regional value chains and collected inputs from private sectors, which identified that various issues. I will list and will be brief about the findings as provided by the private sector. Private sector identified that uncertain political relations is affecting the growth of regional value chains of Pakistan. And then there is lack of business to consumer channels with regional partners, and domestic regulatory burden also does not allow SMEs to become exporting entities. As there is abundance of domestic regulations, there are regulations at federal level and then the provincial level, which add multiple layers of regulations, which is cumbersome for SMEs growth. There is lack of FDI policy that incentivizes new entrants from the region. Two main sectors in which Pakistan can integrate and expect investment from regional partners is pharmaceutical sector and smartphone. But due to lack of coherent FDI policies, Pakistan could not materialize the required FDI in these sectors. Then there exist the logistic constraints as Pakistan performed poorly in World Bank's Logistic Performance Index due to lack of efficient customs and infrastructure related to international shipments and logistic competitiveness. Firms identified that there is lack of information regarding SEZs as what firms can supply from each SEZ. Only limited information is available for Russia economic zone. Their firms know that what they can supply from that SEZ. Then firms identified that there are lack of financial relations for Pakistan with their regional partners, such as there are no direct channels with other regional partners except Afghanistan and China. What is the way forward for Pakistan to integrate in regional value chains and global value chains? Pakistan must ensure that the textile sector firms are able to participate all along the productivity spectrum then there is need to invest in human capital, for which Ministry of Overseas Pakistan and Human Resource can play a significant part. Then there is need of new trade agreements with our regional partners, and in which if the reviews are required, then it must include the province, for instance, on FDI and trade in services. Here, Board of Investment can play a significant role. Then Pakistan should revise its tariff policy to use it effectively for growth of industries. There is need to review the regulatory burden on industries. For instance, there are multiple number of regulatory authorities for manufacturing sector, such as 13 regulatory bodies exist for manufacturing sector, and 7 regulatory bodies exist that are adding the burden on agriculture sector growth. There is also need for provincial industrial policies so that industries can grow and expect consistent growth. Firms also identify that there is need to digitize custom procedures. And other measures that firms identified include financial markets integration and securing property rights and ensuring rule of law, which and last but not the least, effective labor policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asif, for such an insightful presentation. Now I would start the discussion. Am I audible? Now starting off the discussion with our panelists. Starting off the discussion by inviting Mr. Jamil for his kind remarks, and I would like you to ask. I would like you to kindly just explain us the challenges and barriers faced by the exporters in Pakistan, and what are the key sectors in Pakistan to promote the global value chain for sustainable cross-border trade. Furthermore, you kindly specify the policy measures and initiatives taken by the Board of Investment to promote the integration of GVCs in Pakistan. Over to you, sir. Mr. Jamil, you are unmute, please. Sir. Can you hear us, Mr. Jamil?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay. Sorry. So it was my issue on my side. So it was a good presentation by Asif Saab. And just to respond on the issue he mentioned on the special economic zones. So he mentioned about Rashakai special economic zone, which is one of those special economic zones being run, being developed by China under the CPEC sort of agreement. And obviously it is a key special economic zone based in KP province, and it's near the China border. And obviously we hope it will become economic hub of the province, and it will help Pakistan in the sort of integration in the JVCs by providing the base for Pakistan to export to Afghanistan and other regional markets in Central Asia. But let's not forget that Board of Investment being the secretariat for the special economic zones, we have notified 27 special economic zones out of, I should mention few, Bin Qasim, special economic zone in Karachi, which is very well populated, is near the seaport, and Dabiji special economic zone, which is being developed under CPEC, again in Karachi. The other two worth mentioning are one in Faisalabad and one in Lahore. They are very well populated as well. And for your information, Asif Saab, if you just visit our website, www.invest.gov.pk, there is a whole section of special economic zones, and you will find each and every detail on special economic zones on our website. It's pretty interactive and got all the sort of details there. So that was just to respond in terms of special economic zones. But you were right. I was myself sort of reading an article by State Bank of Pakistan, which mentioned that Pakistan stands among those economies which could not realize the benefits of integrating into GVCs across different sectors, unlike the successful examples of Vietnam and Bangladesh, which you mentioned sort of in your presentation. So Pakistan sort of has one of the lowest trade to GDP ratios in the world at 30%. So this is an area of concern for us. But obviously, in terms of trade, Ministry of Trade and Commerce might be the better sort of for them to cover this area. But from my perspective, I think root causes behind Pakistan's lack of integration with JVCs. Firstly, if I can mention lack of sort of industrialization, which is foundation obviously for manufacturing value addition. So this will be the first one for me. Secondly, I think you rightly mentioned in your presentation, below par ease of doing business environment, which is obviously non-conducive to the growth of business and private infrastructure. We are aware, and to sort of work towards a better ease of doing business environment. We used to work with World Bank before, but now that EODB has been sort of stopped for now, we have started our own initiative called Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative, PRMI. So this is a key initiative of Pakistan government to modernize and regulate the local business through sort of technological intervention. The aim is obviously to provide a conducive business environment in the country. And this PRMI initiative, by the way, has been sort of recognized by international organizations, including the World Bank, WTO, and all those. They have sort of told us that they will replicate this in other developing countries also. So thirdly, inability of Pakistani businesses to tap into trade potential offered by their partners, sort of partly owing to sort of higher levels of tariffs also. And we are at Board of Investment, we have now an online portal also, where we try to create joint ventures, between Pakistani companies and their sort of foreign partners. So we have been doing this sort of for a year now, and we are doing this matchmaking online for the past 1 year. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of special economic zones, Board of Investment being the secretariat, we have notified 27 special economic zones across Pakistan. And as I already mentioned, the ones in Karachi, Bin Qasim and Dabiji, which are near the seaport, and Rashakai, mentioned by Asif in his presentation also, it is near the China border. So as I said, it is an ideal location. And so we hope that when these SEZs are fully populated, they will help sort of in global value chain integration. Pakistan also, in addition, rightly mentioned by Asif, needs to liberalize our trade policy for enhancement of its share in JVCs, sort of by designing sort of an adequate, effective institutional framework. So this is something we are working on. In terms of policy, the Board of Investment is engaged in policy advocacy across all departments, and to facilitate the legislation with effective sort of economic policies for our input pertaining to inclusion of such measures which can facilitate inward investment. We already touched base on joint ventures. And lastly, we are also working on our new investment policy, which is now sort of in the cabinet division for approval. Once that comes out, you will see much more liberalized investment policy from our side. So I'll close my remarks here, and then others can comment, and then I can chip in again where needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jamil sir, highlighting the challenges and potential special economic zones for in all over the country that can promote the integration of GVCs in Pakistan. So now for the next discussion, I would like to ask Dr. Gonzalo Varela. So so my question is, sir, in the backdrop of Pakistan current economic situation, socio-economic situation, has the World Bank identified any targeted sector in Pakistan that may be considered significant to play their part in enhancing the integration of Pakistan in global value chain and to make it competitive on a global scale? Or what do you suggest? What is your point of view that how important is the investment in the physical infrastructure and human resource development, like in transport, logistic, educational and vocational training to enable Pakistan prime participation in global value chain? So how World Bank support Pakistan with its infrastructure projects under this discussion, please?
Thank you, Mahin. Many interesting questions there. So let me start by saying, we try to stay away from identifying sectors that could have potential. In principle, there are many activities in Pakistan that are likely to perform very well in global value chains, in international production networks. That is another way of calling them. If the right enabling environment is there. Pakistan has a very strong textile and apparel sector. Pakistan has a very strong IT sector, right? So software development, back office type of services. In agriculture, there is also a lot of potential. But there may be many other sectors that are not yet there, but they may emerge with the right enabling environment. So rather than focusing on identifying sectors, I think the key question here would be, what are the characteristics of an enabling environment that can help all these gains that Asif was mentioning in his interesting presentation materialize if Pakistan takes better advantage of global value chains related to increased productivity, related to increased exports, more foreign exchange coming into the country, more investment, better, and more jobs. And you asked me about infrastructure, and you asked me about training. And these are important things, but I would say these are not the crucial elements for the emergence or the success of global value chains. So infrastructure is always good for reducing production costs. Education of the workforce is also an important thing for increasing productivity. So there's no doubt that those issues are important. However, when we talk about global value chains, what we are talking about is about firms that trade among themselves with other firms that are in different countries and that may send a raw material to another firm that is located somewhere else, and then it comes back to Pakistan in the form of an intermediate input that is further processed, and then it goes to a third country in the form of a final good. So that is what global value chains are, is a way of structuring production that is fragmented across countries. So instead of you producing, for example, Himalayan salt from beginning to end, extracting the salt from the Punjab mine and packaging it, and selling to the final consumer in a supermarket in the US, what you end up having is several steps in the process by which Pakistan sends the salt, someone else refines it or packs it, and then someone else is actually doing the customer, finding the customers and selling it at retail levels in another country. So what do you need for this kind of integration into world markets through global value chains? Well, because goods, when they are part of global value chains, move across borders many times. The worst thing you can do is to make it difficult for goods to move across markets, across borders. And this is something that unfortunately Pakistan does. So it is very difficult to import, and it is also sometimes difficult to export. And I'm going to mention 3 things that I think are key to improve this enabling environment, other than infrastructure investments and other than investments in education, that again, they are important, but I wouldn't see them as crucial in this issue of global value chain integration. The first thing is that import duties are extremely high in Pakistan. So the fact that import duties are high, give you an example. So imagine that a firm wants to come and invest in the value chain of bicycles, and wants to produce, wants to make the bicycles here, but for that it needs to import the pedals and the chains and the frames. Now the tariff on the frames, pedals, and chains of bicycles in Pakistan is 26%. It's extremely high. So no firm will want to set shop in Pakistan to assemble bicycles if it has to pay a 26% import duty on frames or on pedals or in any part of the components to make a bike. They will go somewhere else in which import duties on these parts are 0. There are many, many, many countries across the world that have set 0 or virtually 0 import duties on parts, components, intermediate inputs of this type. So reducing import duties is a crucial element. Someone can tell me, well, you know, if you're an exporter, you don't pay the import duties on intermediates, you can get a refund, a rebate under a duty drawback scheme, which in principle is true. But in Pakistan, these schemes called export facilitation schemes do not work all that well, which means that many firms in Pakistan actually choose not to use them. Many exporters, even if they're entitled to use these schemes, they choose not to use them because refunds are late, because they have to deal with an organization called the Input-Output Coefficient Organization that comes and tells you you cannot use more than this input into the production of this output. So you need to justify to IOCO how much input you can use to produce output, which means you cannot really innovate, because if you innovate, you will have the auditors from the Input-Output Coefficient Organization telling you, no, you cannot import that much, and then refunds are going to be late. So on the one hand, you have high import duties. On the other hand, you have export facilitation schemes that don't work all that well. And here, Asif was mentioning how Sri Lanka in the region does much better in the way it integrates to global value chains. Well, Sri Lanka has temporary importation for export processing schemes that are fantastic, that most exporters avail to them in a way that is very efficient. That's why it can integrate well in global value chains. The third thing I will mention, that again has to do with enabling environment, is what is it that Pakistan does to facilitate investment, but in particular foreign direct investment. And here, I'm happy that Jamil Saab is here. The investment law that regulates the setup shop of foreign firms in Pakistan dates from 1976. And in that investment law, what it says is that foreign investment is allowed in sectors in which there is no Pakistani investment. But there is Pakistani investment in most sectors, which means that in principle, foreign direct investment in Pakistan is not allowed. De facto, what happens is that that law has been somehow replaced by an investment policy of 2013 that is more liberal, that says actually there's a negative list, but in the other sectors you can invest. However, that's a policy. The investment policy of 2013 is, from a legal standpoint, superseded by the law. The law has a greater stature, which means that creates uncertainty for investors. And that uncertainty could be resolved if that law is amended and that 2013 policy that is liberal and has a negative list, as good practice tells you to do, is actually transformed into an act that supersedes or replaces the 1976 investment law. So these are 3 things that, in my opinion, import duties, export facilitation schemes, and investment law, that will do much more to help the integration of GVCs, of Pakistan into GVCs, than investments in infrastructure, investments in education, that again are necessary, but not for GVCs. they're necessary in general. Is the World Bank working on these issues? Yes. So the World Bank is both working in infrastructure and education, but it's also working on the enabling environment, on areas related to national tariff policy, to help with the reduction of import duties, helping the streamlining of export facilitation schemes, and also engage with the BOI in the Pakistan regulatory modernization initiative, as Jamil Saab mentioned, but also on issues related to advisory to investment policies. I'll stop here. I'm happy to come and clarify if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalo, for your interventions. Yes, I agree with you that we have a high processing cost and input cost, and we have a very high trade tariffs and these kind of a cross-border taxation. And yes, you highlighted rightly that I need of developing the infrastructure and logistic and trade facilities for enhancing the role of not only GVCs but international trade. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalo. Now I would like, for the next, I would like Mr. Shoaib Zafar. Mr. Shoaib Zafar. So just highlight the issues faced by the exporters in transport and logistic communication and fiscal services, and what are some practical solutions beneficial for the emergence of opportunities for GVCs, and kindly highlight the effectiveness of institutional framework and policy measures needed in the development of GVCs. Over to you, Mr. Zafar. Mr. Zafar, kindly unmute yourself. You're not audible.
Apologies. This is something which frequently happens with me. So apologies again. Thank you very much, Ms. Mahin, for inviting me over, and happy to see some really familiar faces. And I really appreciate STPI for holding this event, this webinar, and also selecting a topic which is of much relevance, great relevance to Pakistan and government of Pakistan, like Ministry of Commerce and Board of Investment has also been involved in promoting this very policy objective. I, as a part of International Trade Center, have been involved in few of the activities under our projects which are underway with primarily with Ministry of Commerce and Trade Development Authority of Pakistan. Somebody just mentioned about the selection of sectors for export. So I would just like to highlight here that if you're familiar with strategic trade policy framework of Pakistan, currently they have actually identified 18 priority sectors for export enhancement. These sectors are broadly divided into two categories. One is development part and the other one is non-development or non-traditional categories. Fortunately, International Trade Center had was able to collaborate with Ministry of Commerce on working on few of these sectors, and after carrying out our consultations and using various ITC developed tools, we were able to recommend Ministry of Commerce a few sectors which in our view could have been in focus for export enhancement. Out of those, Ministry of Commerce and those analyses were primarily based on the 18 priority sectors listed in the STPF. So out of those, the Ministry of Commerce allocated about 10 priority sectors to ITC to develop their roadmaps and national export strategies. Logistics was one of them. Recognizing the importance of this logistics sector, as many of us are aware, it is a cross-sectoral sector, and the competitiveness and relevance of exports is largely dependent upon a strong logistics sector wherever it is available. So, especially in the post-COVID scenario where we have the air freight spaces have shrunk and the sea freights have skyrocketed. So in this scenario, the importance of logistics services becomes even more prominent, especially in case of Pakistan, which has a geographical advantage, and it is a developing country which is looking to become an export hub. The importance of logistics sector is even more, where especially in the current scenario, like I mentioned, the freight costs, the FOB value becomes more important for Pakistan because it is not solely dependent upon the distance factor. It is involving some other factors as well, and which would need the attention of policymakers to develop a strong logistics sector. So in terms of key challenges, just to set you a brief context, as I mentioned, we have worked on logistics sectors as well, and various challenges were highlighted by the key stakeholders. The consultations were extensive, and they were involving Trade Development Authority of Pakistan, Ministry of Commerce, Government of Pakistan, and of course prominent private sector organizations related to logistics sector. So out of those consultations, few challenges were highlighted, and I would like to focus upon only 5 of them. And I'd like to briefly mention those sectors, those challenges highlighted as a result of our stakeholder consultations, and they're also part of our national export strategies. The first one is domestic support network. If a country is facing, if a business is facing difficulty in moving less than truckload, LTL shipments across the country, then there is high likelihood that their export competitiveness and the cost of the product, their transport is going to rise. So in case of Pakistan, the domestic transport network needs to be established, and it needs to reach at a level which could address these issues. The second one, that might sound a bit counterintuitive, but our analysis on working found out that the per ton cost of a big truck is actually lesser than small vehicle. So what I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make here is, if we use a bigger truck, normally in case of Pakistan, especially in logistics sector, we're using the smaller trucks, and the fleets are not well developed as per international standards. So if we are somehow able to utilize long vehicle, big trucks, that actually encourages the consolidation of shipments, and which ultimately reduces per kilo cost carried in those containers. Moving on to the next challenge was the wastage. Of course, once like Pakistan is an agricultural country, and they're also striving to become a prominent exporter of agricultural products. But if in transit there is a wastage of perishables, and we are not able to consolidate those agricultural produces, that actually makes the product less competitive, and also the additional burden has to be borne by the other producer. So wastage is one of the other key issues which was highlighted. And moving on to my next point, which was highlighted probably by Gonzalo's also, that if there are delays at the border, that is going to help nobody. if a truck is lying in a queue, it is not earning money, it is wasting. So it is, a high time that Pakistan adheres to maybe the provisions of trade facilitation agreement of the WTO, or it digitizes the process and makes it more transparent and streamlined. I know many efforts are being taken in this regard, but of course, this is one thing which was repeatedly highlighted by the stakeholders in our consultations. And lastly, lack of cold chains. If a country has a strong agricultural base and it is not able to preserve, or it is not able to develop, you know, impactful cold chains, that is going to ultimately affect the export capability. So if Pakistan wants to become an exporter of the perishables, of course, then the presence of cold chain is a must. These were just the gist of the key challenges which were highlighted during our discussions. But moving on to the next part, how or what policy recommendations can be put forward to better integrate Pakistan into global value chains. We do see that Pakistan's strategic trade policy framework does mention integration into global value chains as one of its pillars, and I believe many efforts are being taken at the Ministry of Commerce's level, or whether it is Board of Investment level, and also in collaboration with international partners. But like all of us know, the JVC development and participation of any country would largely depend upon the economic fundamentals of Pakistan, of any country. Not just economic fundamentals, but it has to be coupled with sane and rational and appropriate national policies. Unless those policies are in place, the country might not be able to fully capitalize the gains of the global value chain systems. So starting off with the first thing, like mentioned earlier, that if a country wants to become a part of a global value chain, that means the production process is fragmented across different regions, different countries. So a good might have to travel many times across the border. And if there are no streamlined processes of movement across the borders, and there are delays, and then it might, hurt the chances of global integration and for JVC. So in case of Pakistan, it is strongly recommended that Pakistan should promote policies which reduce such trade costs, because every barrier at every minute actually of delay at the border is going to cost more. So that is actually a extra cost borne by the exporter or the trader, and which actually makes the good or the trade less competitive. So introducing custom reforms and developing transport and port infrastructure and digitization of processes to smoothen the flow across the border is need of the hour. Secondly, Pakistan definitely needs to enhance its market access. But what tools are available for that? The first, in my view, Ministry of Commerce is engaged in free trade agreements and preferential trade agreements. But in my view, one thing they should be focusing on is rationalizing of their tariffs. Unless tariffs are rationalized and the trade is liberalized and the other non-tariff measures available, in place are eliminated, Pakistan can never be an important player of global GVCs. So tariff escalations or can be detrimental for any country, and Pakistan is no exception. We have seen in case of countries like Peru, Bangladesh, or many African countries, they have used similar policies for integration of GVCs, and I think Pakistan can also use such policies. Of course, they need to be customized according to ground realities of Pakistan, but definitely the broader direction should be the same. Moving on, one thing in my view is, which is of utmost importance, is enforcement of contracts or intellectual property rights. You know, if you're talking about GVCs, you are actually talking about a network of different firms. If there is no guarantee of the protection of their intellectual property, no firm or business can dare enter into any country. So in this scenario, organizations like IPO gain prominence and relevance, and I think their importance becomes more crucial. So enforcement of contract and intellectual and protection of intellectual property rights is also one of the recommendations. Just to close my talk today, I would just like to mention here that national policies should capitalize on comparative advantage also. For example, Pakistan, we keep on saying that Pakistan does have a strong base, and we have an abundance of human capital available. But do we have right policies available to ensure that the labor prices do not become uncompetitive? Do we have relevant incentives available to give them a proper training or build their capacity? So also, if we want to upgrade our Pakistan and in the GVC ladder, the focus should be on more qualitative human resources, development of qualitative human resources than just number. So I would like to just close my remarks here, and I'll be available for any further clarification or discussion afterwards. But for now, I would stop here. Thank you. Over to you, Mahin.
Thank you, Shoaib, for highlighting the key challenge, highlighting the priority sectors for exporters, and thank you, and for highlighting the logistic challenges faced by the exporters regarding the domestic support network, delay in borders, and lack of cold chain. And of course, trade liberalization and exporter-friendly policies are much needed of the time. So for the next, I would like to ask Mr. Sebastian about the specific initiative launched by Germany to support Pakistan in enhancing its role in global value chain, and how do you think that Pakistan can learn through other countries like Germany and expand its trade to assess the international market? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
you. Thank you very much for this invitation. Pleasure to participate, and let me tell you that Asif's presentation was especially interesting for me because I spent some years before I came here to Pakistan in Vietnam. The case which in Asif's presentation was one of the, let's say, more successful cases, and interesting for me to compare this. Maybe it's interesting when we talk now about Germany's role to have a short look on Germany, or should I better say the EU. The EU is actually Pakistan's second most important trading partner globally, accounting in 2020 for 14% of Pakistan's total trade and absorbing 28% of Pakistan's total exports. On the other hand, Pakistan is only and slashes the 42nd largest trading partner in goods, accounting for only 0.3% of EU trade. So a lot of headroom there. And I should also not forget to mention that within the EU, Germany is by far the biggest trading partner of Pakistan. So now coming back to your questions, there are two different segments regarding the question in which context Germany, or shall I better say the EU, is supporting Pakistan. First, the trade policy support aspect. And in this context, there are 2 points to be taken into account. First, external trade is not in the competency of the German government anymore. This is EU competency dealt by the EU Commission in Brussels, simply a result of the EU unification process. And second, we have to also have a look on WTO and their rules. And one of their bedrock principles is the most favored nation rule. That means if a country like Germany grants someone a special favor, like lower customs duty rate or whatsoever, Germany would have to do the same for all other WTO members. This is the framework in which Germany can maneuver in this context. The EU has a trade cooperation agreement from 2004. That's important to know. But what is more important to know is that there is actually a WTO licensed or WTO accepted preferential trade agreement by the EU, the so-called Generalized Scheme of Preferences, GSP+, where Pakistan is also a partner of. And actually, right now with this GSP+, more than 78% of Pakistan's exports enter the EU at preferential rates. More than 76% of Pakistan's exports, including textiles and clothing, enter the EU even duty and quota free. But nothing comes without any cost. It is also necessary to flag here that the GSP Plus requests from Pakistan to keep ratification and implement actually 27 core international conventions on human labor rights, environmental protection, and good governance. And that is a process which bears certain challenges because according to the EU analysis, this does not go optimally at the moment, and there could be some problems coming out of that in the future. From the German perspective in this context, I should mention that there is actually a trade chamber and a so-called German Trade and Investment Office dealing with Pakistan, but unfortunately this is located in Dubai. This is certainly a suboptimal situation. We have to work on that, but for that, the trade volume simply has to get much bigger between our two countries in order to justify own institutions like that here in Pakistan. This is the first, the trade support aspect. Now I come to the second aspect, the development cooperation aspect. And here also from the EU's and the German perspective. Why from the EU's perspective? Because the EU, every EU euro invested in Pakistan contains 25 cents from the German budget. The EU as such, the EU Commission spends about 100 million euros annually here in Pakistan, and a major part of this is focused to increase education and employment skills, human capital as one of the major pillars for a successful integration in global value chains here in Pakistan. On the other side, Germany is also directing its development cooperation towards improving Pakistan's human capital via technical and vocational training. But the German bilateral development cooperation deals also with improving renewable energy and energy efficiency here in Pakistan to make Pakistan's energy infrastructure more resilient. Also an important aspect for not only foreign direct investment, but also integration into global value chains. Last but not least, this development cooperation deals also with health and social security, surely also an important segment to improve human capital here in the country. The bilateral government negotiations are just over and led to a biannual volume of 163 million euros. And now I would come to a problem point which should be taken into account very carefully by the Pakistan side regarding future global value chains in cooperation with the EU. And that is the so-called EU supply chain law, which is about to be started. And because this is a supply chain law, which actually goes beyond the current legal situation, it aims to oblige companies importing from outside the EU, like importing, for instance, from Pakistan, to carefully manage social and environmental impacts throughout their entire supply chains, including their own business operations, but also including their direct as well as indirect suppliers. In a way, that means you like it or you don't like it, and I have my personal view on that, but that does not count here. That means exporting the rather strict EU corporate social responsibility standards to our global value chain partners regarding human rights, regarding labor standards in the framework of the ILO, International Labour Organization, regarding environmental and climate protection, and also regarding responsible corporate governance. Actually, that there will be only the alternative in the future: either you take this and match it with it, or you have to leave the global value chain, because this law contains pretty tough fines and punishments. It actually refers to all EU companies with more than 500 employees and more than 150 million annual turnover. These are about 9,400 companies. But even in slashes worse, it's even stricter for so-called high-risk sectors, where it refers then already to companies with more than 250 employees and more than only 40 million turnover. And this refers especially to textiles and leather and agriculture, just the sectors where Pakistan, in my view, has really potential at the moment, at least, regarding the EU. So the fines and punishments, as said, are strict. They are going up to 8 million euros, 8.5 million US dollars, or up to 2% of the annual turnover of the respective company, which might also be excluded from public tenders if violating this law. That's a pretty tough point, which will lead to a lot of how can I say, information work and training, etc., also here in Pakistan. Now, I don't know if I have a minute still left when it comes to this question: what can Pakistan learn from Germany? I think the additional secretary has already mentioned that Germany and Pakistan, in a way, have different historic backgrounds, whereas industrialization has a pretty long history in Germany, going back to the middle of the 19th century and only interrupted twice by 2 world wars. Pakistan is there still in a, I would say, in a starting phase, and that has to be simply taken into account. So it's a long way to get there, and yeah, of course there are some tools to be copied, like what has mentioned, I think, by Gonzalo, the proper trade and investment policies and laws to be issued, but of course also the human capital factor, infrastructure, and also a political drive for integration regionally and globally. But at the end, each country has to find its own way in that regard. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian, for your interventions. I agree that the GSP Plus scheme by the EU European Union is quite encouraging for the development of trade and investment in Pakistan, and working in all the three areas, working all the areas which which the United Nations charters explains that the labor laws, environment, and human rights, and working on in the area of governance can help the can help Pakistan in promoting the integration in GVCs. So, and of course, developing the human capital, developing the infrastructure, social security will also help us to increase the role of GVCs and improve the situation of GVCs in Pakistan. So thank you for your intervention. Now, for the next, Mr. Atif, I would request you to Mr. Atif, to diversify. I would ask to diversify the export basket of Pakistan. What do you think what would be the effective institutional framework of gaining the export competitiveness of Pakistan, considering the blackout outlook of Pakistan in the export sectors today? And how would you suggest the strategic and policy measures that can be helpful in Pakistan with regarding the challenges we are currently facing? Over to you, Asif.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my presentation, that institutional quality that Shoaib Saab was also discussing, institutional quality matters like enforcement of intellectual property rights and ensuring consumer protection is necessary to build trust among the foreign entities. And once institutional quality is improved, foreign funds can aim to invest in Pakistan. Besides institutional quality, I think flexible laws for investment and labor, like I mentioned, the example of India, that liberalizes its investment policy, through which they are incentivizing and reducing costs for investment in India, is also important. Then in terms of institutions, the regulatory burden in the form of abundance of regulatory bodies like at the federal level and provincial level. These are adding layers of regulations on which is affecting the growth of SME sector. Due to this multiple layers, multiple taxation is implemented on SME and obviously on large firm as well. So I think institutional quality, flexible labor laws, and the reduction in regulatory bodies are important to liberalize and increase growth of Pakistan in region and in global value chains. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Asif, for your intervention. Absolutely, you're right that governance and trade-friendly policies are the idea of the time for enhancing the role of global value chains in the trade landscape of Pakistan. So with that, I would like to wrap up the first round. Before we move on to the concluding remarks, I would like to request all the panelists to give their two recommendations regarding the subject. So starting with Dr. Gundrado.
Thank you, Maheen. So my two recommendations for Pakistan to tap into this opportunity that global value chains that account for about 3/4 of the trade that takes place in the world are that Pakistan reduces trade costs. The reduction of trade costs is going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial to integrate into global value chains, but more generally, it's going to be crucial to reduce prices. It's going to be crucial for increasing productivity, etc. Reducing trade costs, as you can think of it, of three components. One is there's a policy element that has to do with import duties, that has to do with the export facilitation schemes, as I mentioned before. The second component has to do with logistics, as Shoaib was mentioning before. has to do with the way ports operate. It has to do with how efficient transport systems are. And a third component that is often overlooked has to do with promotion, how Pakistan is known internationally, and what can institutions do to improve that information that foreign markets may have about Pakistan. And here there's TDAP, there's a Trade Development Authority of Pakistan that is mandated to do export promotion. So improving the quality of export promotion will help. So that reducing trade costs. And the second element I would say is improving the investment climate. And the investment climate, again, has two parts. Part has to do with regulations, part has to do with laws that rule how foreign firms can operate in Pakistan, but also rule how foreign firms can repatriate profits. That is a very important thing for Pakistan to attract foreign direct investment. Firms that come here will want to make profits and repatriate them if they so want to. So these are my two elements: reduce investment costs, reduce trade costs. These are my recommendations. Thank you so much, Mahin.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalo. For the next, I would like to request Shoaib Saab. Please give two recommendations on the subject, please. Sorry, I think there must be some mistake. He has leave. So for next, I would like to request Mr. Sebastian. Please give your top two recommendations on today's topic.
Yeah, okay. My professional background is lawyer. I'm a lawyer, so maybe no wonder that my first recommendation goes towards securing the rule of law that contains international intellectual property rights, but also clear tariff regulations, a clear legal situation, because investment and trade partners need trust and security when they invest money in supply chains or production facilities. This has also to do with the issue of corruption. Pakistan has to improve the corruption/speed money practice and move away from the end of the Transparency International ranking in that regard. It also contains a clear request that Pakistan has to make its jurisdiction, its court system more efficient, more impartial, in order to secure the enforcement of laws and regulations. Second, human capital. Human capital, especially in the understanding of improving education and vocational training in Pakistan, because I think Pakistan has to, as much as it makes money right now at the lower end of the added value chain with pretty little processed supply chain goods, it has to try to move up this towards a higher added value input in the global value chains, and that means improving human capital. So that is my second advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian, for your such nice recommendations. For the next, I would like to ask Mr. Asif, if I may request you, please. Mr. Asif, over to you, Mr. Asif.
Yes, I will continue the point made by Gonzalo about the investment. I think a liberalized investment policy, FDI policy, is important to attract foreign investment. Like I mentioned earlier, the example of India, which liberalized its policy and provided land to foreign investors, provided so that they can reduce costs, and also they liberalized their labor laws to incentivize and attract foreign investment in India. If we look at the regional investment situation for Pakistan, there is very minimal investment prospects or integration. If we look at with the carry countries. The data from State Bank indicate that no investment has been made from carry countries to Pakistan since July 2021. And only minimum investment has been made from ASEAN countries. So this shows that the investment opportunities or investment cooperation between Pakistan and regional partners is quite limited. And in the absence of liberalized FDI policy, I think we cannot expect that our regional partners will invest in Pakistan. Then the institutional quality, as mentioned by Dr. Sebastian, regarding intellectual property rights and consumer protection is also very important because firms want to ensure that their rights are protected. Then the logistic performance index is also very important. Pakistan has to improve its logistic performance index by investing in logistics such as custom procedure to digitize the custom procedure and improve the ports infrastructure. So these are my key recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asif, for your recommendations. With this discussion, our discussion, moderated discussion session comes to an end. So, before we proceed to end the session, I would like to ask Mr. Jamil for his remarks and vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Jamil.
Thank you very much, all. So, just few points from my side, rightly mentioned by Gonzalo and Sebastian. We need to improve our investment climate and cost of doing business. So at the Board of Investment, we are getting support from IFC and World Bank both, and our Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative effort, we hope we are working towards. That will be helping the ease of doing business in Pakistan. Will go a long way in that direction. Also, as I mentioned earlier, our new investment policy approval is underway, and this is about to get approved. So this will also go a long way to support businesses in Pakistan and our local and foreign investors. Secondly, I mentioned earlier, our special economic zones, we hope, will play a vital role towards GVCs, towards achieving this goal and what we discussed earlier, especially those SEZs based in Lahore, Faisalabad, Karachi, and KP. We are always available at the Board of Investment and to facilitate and support our local and foreign investors, as mentioned by Asif. They are all welcome. And I thank you all once again and wish you all a very good and great weekend.
Thank you, Jamil sir, for your concluding this session and recommendations. Here is a question for you, Dr. Gonzalo. How do you think that Pakistan can address the hindrance at the border while importing their products where the border country doesn't allow the access? What should the government of Pakistan do in this regard?
I'm not sure I get the question. So if the border problem, there are two sides of it, right? So is the border problem with importing or with exporting? If it's with importing, then the challenge is on the side of Pakistan. It's on the exporting problem. So if it's the border country doesn't allow access, well, I'm not sure there's a solution to that. So this is why there are political issues that are, or security issues that are beyond what we can say from a point of view of economics. So not sure if this is relating to the Afghanistan situation or to the India situation, but clearly there are political constraints with which governments operate.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalo. With this, our session will come to an end. All the recommendations will be helpful for our policy paper, which will be extracted from this review and input, and the concerned government and ministries department will be updated of the recommendations for improving the integration of GVCs in Pakistan. Thank you everyone, and the panelists and the audience who have joined us online for this session. Further, if anyone have any query or discussion, they can discuss contact at mahindehan@STPI. Thank you everyone.